everyone. Welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Andrea Edney. I am the 111th president of the National Press Club. I'm an editor at Bloomberg News. And thank you so much for being here tonight and welcoming our guest, Sean Spicer, here. I'm going to take just a moment. If you haven't already silenced your cell phones, please take a moment to do that right now. Also, if you're going to be tweeting this evening, the hashtag is NPCLive. And if you have questions, there are question cards, I think probably on your seats. I see some of them down here. We have two volunteers, Lori and Danny, who are going to be passing the question cards up to me. So please raise a question card and get it to one of them so that it can come up here to me. All right. So this evening, Mr. Sean Spicer is here with his new book, The Briefing: Politics, the Press, and the President. In December 2016, Mr. Spicer was named White House Press Secretary, and shortly after that, also began acting as Communications Director for the Trump administration. He served as the 28th White House Press Secretary for 6 months in 2017. During his tenure as White House Press Secretary, Mr. Spicer developed sometimes a contentious rapport with some of the White House press secretaries. He made a number of public statements that were controversial, some of them false. He has defended these statements by stating that the job of the press secretary is to communicate the thoughts and views of the president, even if he does not agree with them. And we're going to have some questions about that tonight.
Sure you will.
Before he took his position at the White House, Mr. Spicer served as Communications Director of the Republican National Committee from 2011 to 2017, and as its Chief Strategist from 2015 to 2017. Mr. Spicer is the father of 2. And one quote from his book is, "God, family, country, Navy, candidate." And that is a personal creed, I believe, for you. So perhaps this evening, Mr. Spicer will give us a little more insight on what led him to ultimately serve as White House Press Secretary under President Donald Trump. Please join me in welcoming tonight's guest, Sean Spicer. So, is there anything that you would like to tell us before I ask you some questions?
First of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. I guess the one thing I would start with is sort of the why, right? When I left the White House, my intention wasn't to write a book. There was a lot of opportunities that I had been blessed to have come my way, and I got a lot of advice from folks that just said this is a really difficult task. You have to be willing to take a lot of time and effort, and there has to be a lot of commitment as far as your schedule goes going forward. And I thought, okay, that's really not probably the best use of time. What I found was 2 things. One, as I went around and started speaking to groups and organizations throughout the country, the same questions sort of came up over and over again, both regarding me and a lot of what had happened over the last 2 years. And so with respect to me, it was sort of like I read a story that you did the following, or you believe the following. And I felt that if I wanted to tell my own story and say, this is who I am, this is what I believe and why I believe it, and some of the things I did and why I did them, that it was incumbent upon me to actually tell that tale versus allow others to do it for me. And to your point a moment ago, I think for many Americans, there was this very one-dimensional view of me as this, as you put it, contentious relationship for 30 minutes a day that I didn't think was the complete picture of who I was. And my sort of thought was, if I want people to know a little bit about more who I am and why I do what I do and what I believe, then I need to take the time to write it down. And secondly, I think that the pace at which we've been going at is far too fast, that there hadn't been a real analysis of what had been happening, whether it was the convention or the campaign, and I wanted to make sure that that was documented in a way that explained a lot of the relationship, whether it was the RNC and the Trump campaign, or the campaign in the media, or what have you, what was going on and why it was happening. So part of the reason that I wrote this was so that there was that accounting of what happened, why it happened, what I believed, what the data showed at the time, and the result is this book, The Briefing. And I've tried to at least give people my take of all of that the last few years, but also just to walk back a little bit more, explain who I am and what I believe. And I know as we sit here at the press club, one of the things that I have said in the book and what I've tried to communicate is that there's this belief that I found as I was traveling around the country that people would throw out accusations about what I believe of the press. And I think I wanted to be clear about this, that I believe that in any democracy, especially our democracy here in the United States, as the sort of the beacon of democracies throughout the world, that we need a free, fair, and balanced press corps. And that the same First Amendment that allows the press to write whatever stories they want also gives the citizenry the same right to critique those stories. And I wanted to be clear as to what my views were on a lot of that stuff, because I know, as you pointed out, that there was many times when it was contentious. What I talk about in the book is that there are a lot of really good reporters, and I name them by name, several of your colleagues, that I think do a really good job. And it's not because they're not tough, it's not because they're not tenacious. It's that they're fair and they're professional. And I think right now, more than anything, we need to exalt good journalists and say, these are the people who do a really good job. I don't agree with their stories all the time. Yes, I take issues, but they are true professionals and they are fair in their reporting. And that's a big difference between, I think, a lot of where the problem with some of the critique is right now, is that we throw the baby out with the bathwater and we talk about the press as if it's a monolithic being. And one of the points that I've made throughout the campaign, or excuse me, throughout the book tour, is I don't like it when people ascribe traits to conservatives or people who voted for Donald Trump. Say, if you voted for Donald Trump or if you are a conservative, then you are, and you can fill in the blank. I don't think it's equally good to say the same thing about the press, to throw out terms and say the press is this, the media is that, because there are good journalists and there are bad journalists. There is good reporting and there is bad reporting. And I think there are good, go through every industry. There are good and there are bad. And as soon as we take everybody with one broad brush, we fail to acknowledge the good with the bad. And we put it in one bucket, and I don't think that's a good thing.
That's right. Well, I know there are a lot of people in this room who work really very hard to do their jobs well and to provide a fair and accurate reporting for their readers or their viewers or listeners. So let me, did I interrupt you? Did you?
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right. So let me ask you this. That's a perfect segue to this question. So you're at the National Press Club. Do you believe that the press is the enemy of the American people?
No.
Okay. And do you believe that, and I appreciate that, I hope not, yeah. So what do you think that it does for the political landscape and just for America as a whole when, our country's president says that about the media?
So, as I mentioned a moment ago, I don't like it when any group of people or any industry is painted with a broad brush. I don't think it's a good tactic because we throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I have plenty of problems with the behavior and some of the reporting that some of the people in the press corps engage in. That being said, I also recognize that there are some really, really great journalists out there that do a great service to their organizations, to their readers, and to democracy as a whole. And so, but I think it goes both ways, right? Which is when journalists engage in behavior that throws the baby out with the bathwater, when they talk about Republicans and conservatives and viewers of Donald Trump, they're not engaging in good practice as well. So I think we've all got to be cognizant, whether you're in the media or whether you're in government, of painting one group of people with a broad brush. And my concern right now on the press side is that when you look at these studies that talk about one study has 92% of the coverage of the president being negative. Harvard has a fairly equal study from Shorenstein Center. The Pew Center has one. That to me is troubling. When you are an objective journalist and say, wait a second, are we really doing our job when 90 or 80 or whatever percent of our coverage is considered negative? That's not being tough and tenacious. You've lost a degree of objectivity. And so I think that I don't like where we are as a country, never mind, but I don't think the problem that I have sometimes with the press corps, and I say this respectfully, is that it's always about us, right? It's like, do you think it's okay for the press? Well, at some point, the press also needs to stop and say, is it okay how we're being viewed, or how some of these studies are portraying some of our coverage? But you can't look at it and just...
I do think that's a conversation that happens internally and externally. You can listen to NPR reports all the time about what are we doing as reporters? What is our reporting like? There is a lot of reflection there.
Well, but again, my point is that when you have all of these studies from a variety of organizations, two of which aren't exactly right-leaning, that suggest that the preponderance of the coverage is negative. That should give a news organization pause and say, is this actually an accurate picture of what's going on? And in my view, I'm pretty blatant where I am on the spectrum of the ideological spectrum, is that I go, okay, so when you have unemployment where it is, when you have economic growth where it is, and all these other indices, and you say, okay, if we're 90 to 10 in our coverage? Okay, but again, at some point, you guys are all about facts and all this stuff, and you have three major organizations coming out saying that this is the thing, and then you're going, yeah, but if we can't, we have to question them. You're the same folks who say that we need to be fact-based and look at the evidence, and yet study after study shows that, and when it's negative against your industry, you then say, well, let's not pay attention to it.
I'm not saying that. I'm just not familiar with these studies, so I'm going to go familiarize myself with the studies. But I think that you have to admit that the environment and the attitude towards the media has changed drastically.
Absolutely.
Over the last, I would say, 10, 8, 5 years, right?
And to be clear, just to be clear, I don't think that's a good thing for democracy. It's not a good thing for our society when we are questioning these institutions, when we have to wonder whether or not reporting is balanced or fair. I don't think I am not someone who actually cherishes that. I think that is detrimental to our society when you have to pick up the paper and go, is this accurate or not?
Right. Yes, I would agree with that. Are you personally concerned about the current environment? You support the First Amendment. You acknowledge that a free press is an important component of a democracy. Are you worried about, in this current environment, the personal safety of journalists and how this environment is kind of turning towards journalists in that way?
Yes, but I'm also concerned, again, and I say this, it's sort of like, I get your point, we're here at the press club, this is your job. I am concerned about the safety of journalists, but I'm also concerned about the safety of so many Americans. I'm concerned about the safety of so many conservatives. Sarah Sanders is the first press secretary in the history of the United States to have a Secret Service detail. And they don't give out Secret Service details because they're bored. So there is a reason that she has been provided a security threat, because there is an active threat against her life and that of her family. Where's the concern about that? My point is, I'm concerned about it all. I think we are in a bad place. So yes, I'm concerned about journalists, I'm concerned about government officials. I'm also concerned, as someone who's been a conservative for most of my life, I worry that we get shouted down the level of intolerance that exists for, go wear a Donald Trump shirt on the metro and see how long it lasts.
It depends on where you are, right?
No, right here in Washington, D.C.
Is that true?
100%. But where is and I say this, and again, respectfully, we should not, in a society, this idea that it's just about the press corps is the problem. It's about every one of, but I want to be clear. I am worried about your safety. I'm worried about every journalist's safety, but I'm worried about every one of these people's safety too. The idea that if you walk down the street with a Donald Trump t-shirt or a Republican t-shirt, you are going to get mocked, yelled at, and where's the concern for that? The same First Amendment, the same expression of speech, that every journalist should be able to go out there and feel safe in knowing that they are going to report whatever it is and not have to worry about it, should be the same feeling that every one of the people here and every one of the people outside feels the same way.
Well, certainly, yes.
But I don't feel that there's the same concern that the press has about themselves that they have about the conservative movement when they get attacked, when they get yelled at. And I've been facing this since I was in college. And yet, there's no concern about that. When I was the subject of memes, when I was the subject of attack, there was zero concern about my... You guys aired, not you, I apologize, you did. But when members of the media aired attempts for people to come out and go after me, it was actually mocked, ridiculed, and perpetuated by members of the media. No one concerned about my safety. No one's concerned about... I mean, and so here's my point. We should all, as a country, be concerned when you cannot express yourself, your views peacefully. And when you get intimidated, and the concern that I have is that the press should express the same level of concern when a citizen of this country cannot express their views peacefully.
Well, I mean, I think the press does. I am all for freedom of expression, for freedom of speech. The scarf that I'm wearing right now has the First Amendment written on it. I'm very proud of it. Thank you. But, you know, do you think that some of the public combativeness that we have between some of the current politicians, shall we say, and the press has contributed to the vitriol that some of the press receives from supporters of President Donald Trump?
I think the current environment is not healthy, period. The whole thing. I think trying to figure out who started it and finger point who gets more of the attacks than others is frankly the missing point.
How do you think we get out of it?
I think we get out of it as individuals, in the sense that in the 1970s we faced a similar situation after Vietnam, where we were shouting at each other, we weren't listening to each other. Here's the thing, everybody in this country so often wants someone else to fix a problem, right? So we want term limits because we don't trust voters. When you say that, the question I have is that every one of us is responsible for the current level of vitriol and discourse in this country. And so the answer is how we fix it is that each one of us agrees that the next time that we're in a family, work, otherwise engagement or environment, and someone starts saying, I'm a Hillary supporter, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Trump supporter, we stop and go, let them finish. We're part of, the same way that we're part of the problem, we can also be part of the solution. And I think that's important because it's not someone else's problem to fix. It's society's problem to address. And each one of us has a role to play in that.
Fair enough. Moving on. You have said that the president still communicates with you.
Yes.
What do you talk about?
Whatever he wants to.
Are you providing him counsel in a different way than you were when you were here?
Not really. I mean, if he asks my opinion on something, I give it to him. It's a little bit more free now. But yeah, if he asks, I give it to him. But sometimes it's just to, shoot the breeze about a story or an issue.
How often do you talk?
When he wants. I mean, it's at his discretion.
Can you put a number on it? Can you quantify for us?
I talked to him in the last 72 hours, and if he wants to talk again, phone's on.
But hopefully not the ringer right now.
No, just about.
Thank you. Good. Do you counsel him to make himself more available to the press, or less available to the press? because he often chooses not to speak to the White House press corps on camera.
I don't know that I agree with that. First of all, I don't share the counsel that I provide him, or our conversations are private, unlike some folks. I don't record him. I think I don't think he necessarily holds the same kind of press conferences that have been held in the past, but he quite often is speaking to people on camera. I think any given week, there's a number of opportunities that he's made himself available to the press.
Okay. Sarah Sanders gave 3 press briefings during the month of July. Under other presidents, there's been a daily press briefing. Is this how you think the administration should be engaging with the press?
Here's my view. I think that the press staff should be available to the press on a robust basis. I've not been a big believer that the current construct of the briefing is the most effective way to give information to the press corps of the American people. And because all it's turned into is a show, where the same questions get asked over and over again. And I think that that's a disservice to the media. I think it's a disservice to taxpayers. I think it's a disservice to the staff, because they are spending hours on end preparing themselves to answer this, the same 10 or 12 questions. No matter whether she's out there for 25 minutes or 40 minutes, it's the same level of prep. In that time, there are countless members of the media that aren't getting their questions answered. And so I think that there's a utility in it, in that maybe it's once a week, maybe it's on a fairly regular basis, but I don't know that it has to occur every day. I think, and just to be clear, I think they need to be available to the press every day, and they are. And that's this misnomer that the briefing is synonymous with providing information to the press, which is not true. The press staff is there, basically, 16, 17 hours a day, and then available by email and such, almost 24 hours a day. So, but the briefing itself, I'm not sure is the best way to provide information to members of the media.
What do you think is a better way?
I think that you can have a series of off-camera briefings. I think you could have, I think that an on-camera briefing, making government officials available on camera is a good thing, so that maybe it's, making certain individuals on a topic of the day. So let's say, for example, there's economic news. So you make the chairman of the economic advisors, or the director of OMB, or the National Economic Advisor, available for TV interviews. Maybe you hold a background briefing with them, and maybe you have a gaggle with the press. I think you need to regularly be providing information to the press. I'm just not sure if a daily on-camera briefing is the most effective way to do that.
You mentioned secretly taping the president just a moment ago.
Just to be clear, I mentioned not doing that. Just in case anyone's listening.
So let's talk a little bit about that. I think everyone signed a non-disclosure. Everyone who was working for the president of the White House signed a non-disclosure agreement when they began working for him. Is that true? Can you just walk us through that process?
What I will say is that everyone on the campaign and on the transition did sign a non-disclosure. I'm not going to get into commenting on what documents may or may not have been signed in the White House. That's up to them to comment on. That being said, there's no question that the individual in question that has released these recordings has blown through at least a few non-disclosure agreements, never mind every degree of loyalty and respect that should be afforded to the President of the United States, whether you like him or not. I just, not to mention, just to be clear, the idea of bringing a personal recording device into the situation, to me, is just a massive, not just violation of trust, but an undermining of our national security that I find that to be sort of the missing story in all of this.
How could that have happened? How would she, on her phone, how?
Well, look, when you walk into what they call a SCIF, whether you're in the White House or the Pentagon or wherever, it's a secure facility. There's signs that say, any recording device, Bluetooth, or any device that transmits wirelessly is prohibited. And anyone who's had a security clearance is well briefed in this. I mean, it's literally like saying, what prevents you from going 110 miles an hour down 395? Nothing except for every speed limit sign that says 55 miles an hour. There's nothing that prevents it. Anybody can walk into a skiff with a recording device. They're just violating every security protocol and probably everything that they've ever signed that says that in receiving their security clearance that they will abide by all the relevant regulations and policies. So how it can happen is fairly easy. I mean, it's like anything else. You can bring a device in somewhere, but at some point there's a degree that you have signed a piece of paper, you've raised your hand, and you've sworn allegiance to this country, and you protect the national security interests of it to serve the nation in some capacity. And we trust our fellow citizens. I mean, that's what prevents it. I mean, that's what makes good people from bad people.
So Omarosa said, I think, that she received an offer of, I think, $15,000 a month. How does that compare with any, you began receiving payments, you said, I think.
I still have yet to receive any hush money. And,
so what, just explain this, like what?
Yeah, so here's what she said was the following. She said that many people of the West Wing have been paid, quote, hush money from either the RNC of the campaign or America First, which is the super PAC that supports the President of the United States. And then those people have all signed non-disclosure agreements. Number one, I left the White House on September 1st of 2017. I signed a book deal in December of 2017, late December. I submitted that manuscript in May of 2018. I signed an agreement to serve America First on June 15, 2018, a month after I submitted the manuscript. And I've never signed a non-disclosure with America First, which they put out a statement in December. So I don't know where she's come up with this, but the reality is, and the facts are very clear as to the timeline and what I have and have not signed. With respect to her, when she left the White House, she was very complimentary of the president and his policies and what he had accomplished. The campaign on which she previously served said, hey, we'd be willing to engage in a relationship. The same, and I don't know if this is entirely the same, I'm sure they had White Pence's name, but the same NDA that everyone on the campaign signed, I'm sure they said, okay, if you want to come back to the campaign, you have to sign the same document that you had the last time you held the job. And I'm not sure which she signed then. She signed on the transition. My understanding is she also signed when she worked for The Apprentice. So this idea that somehow the fourth time was out of bounds is a little nuts.
Okay. How did it work with, if you signed a non-disclosure agreement, how did that work with your book? You wrote a book.
I told the president that I was writing a book. I ran it by him. He said, great.
Did the White House attorneys, Mr. McGann, or anyone vet your book?
No.
Did anyone's...
The president's tweeted fairly positively about it. The vice president's tweeted about it. I think I'm the same way.
All right. But you didn't run...
I told the president a couple times during the process what I was up to and where things were, and he kept encouraging me.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about the process of writing the book.
So as I said, I mean, I finally, in December, I kind of reached back out to folks who had represented me and said, hey, do you think that there's still some interest in this? Because I've kind of suddenly gotten interest. He said, if we're going to do this, we got to do it before Christmas, and we hustled. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm going to set up a series of meetings next Tuesday. We met with about 12 publishers. It lined up pretty much in thirds. About 4 said, I don't think there's anything here. Thank you. We're not interested. 4 said, basically, if you write the following, if you're willing to push the envelope and say these kind of things, then we're interested. And then 4 kind of said, we're definitely interested, let's keep talking. I ultimately chose the publisher that basically I went in and said, I want to tell the story, kind of what I said in the intro. I want to tell a little bit of who I am. I want to tell what's happened in the last couple of years. And they said, we love it. And we came to an agreement on the terms. And then I basically spent 6 months, researching. And it was a very interesting process because I talked to a bunch of people, including Ari Fleischer, who said, go back, print out every one of your briefings, and go through, and that'll jog your memory of what was going on that day. And then I pulled down a bunch of articles about things that had been going on, and then I literally interviewed people and said, okay, at this point in the convention, this is how I remember things going, what else was happening. I talked to folks on the campaign, on the transition, and said, okay, what else, who else was part of this decision, what else was happening, what did the data show you, what were you seeing, when did we submit that plan, and treated it like a massive research project. And then, like I said, we had to have it in the first draft in early May, and I felt like a college student. I mean, I was just blowing up against the deadline. And they were like, it was due 48 hours ago. I'm like, I'm getting there. And my wife is here somewhere, and she would tear it up and say,
there she is.
Yeah. And then, so I think if the version of the book that I submitted went out, it would be vastly different than what you're reading. She was an amazing copy editor, and forced me to slow down and say, okay, tell that story in a little bit more detail. Who else was in the room? Give us a little copy. She had a much greater sense of trying to fill out the room, the story, what the feeling was, what the room looked like, and tell the story in a way that was more compelling to the reader. So, but it was a very intense period. My agent was insistent that we have a book out in July. And for anyone who's been involved in the process, it's a very aggressive schedule. And so we were banging up against deadlines. Literally, the day that we got the final stuff in, they said, if you don't have it in by 9 a.m. tomorrow, we have to push the publication date. Now, I don't know how much they were. But we made the deadline within minutes.
So working under the gun, just like journalism, right?
It was, but it was not, I mean, it's been, whatever, 25 years since I've been in college, and I felt, that sense of like final exams all over again.
Yeah. How did you go through and make sure that everything you were writing was accurate?
Part of it is the way that I described it. So I would call people and say, okay, you were there, and I've done stuff, reporters, campaign personnel, White House personnel. I looked at each story and said, okay, I remember that I was there, this is how I recall the story, and they would say, remember, so-and-so was also there, this is also how it, and so I treated it truly like a research project. And I would pull up articles, and in many cases I would quote, this is what the story said. Remember that the book is a very personal tale. It's also how I felt at moments. So if I felt a particular way or wanted to express my belief on something, I didn't need somebody else to say, how did you feel at this particular moment?
Which reminds me, I would be remiss if I did not ask about this. When you were working for the President of the United States, did you lie?
No.
When you were at press conferences?
No, I've answered this multiple times. The way it is, if I said something that I said the President believes the following, so does the President, what did the President mean when he said this? I said the President believes the following. Look, the tenure of a press secretary gets up there and says, look, the President said this, but he's totally wrong, is about 8 seconds. I mean, you get up there and say, the President just said the following, but I'm going to tell you why he's wrong. You're not going to last very long.
Did you?
So, there are times when you can disagree with what he believes or why he said something, but my view, my job to get up there was to say, the President said that he believes the following. Again, that's, we can agree or disagree all day long, but I don't believe the job isn't to get up there and be an interpreter or a fact checker. That's frankly the role that journalists play, which is to say, the President said this, however, contrary to these studies, this person, whatever, this is, but...
Were there times that you were pretty sure that what you were saying is probably not right?
There's been plenty of times over my career where I didn't personally share the analysis or belief of the principal that I worked for.
The proudest to be one of those. That's not a belief.
No, but and I write about that, that's in the book. I've made this 100% clear. If I could have a do-over in life, that is day 1, 2, and 3. then, like, I make no bones about it. Like, that was not the best performance I've ever had.
What would you do?
Everything. What do you want? I mean, you want to start in the morning, or do you want to go?
Just give us one example.
I know when I watch that tape, I look at it and I go, that's not who I am. I'm just sitting there like yelling at people, and I'm like, that's not. Like, so the tone, the tenure, didn't take questions. I mean, we can probably go on for a little bit longer. Give us some more questions, please. So I make no bones about it. But just so we're clear, I walked out of that room and I thought, okay, the president's going to love that. I just socked it to him. And I pick up the phone and he's like, what the heck was that? And I'm thinking, I mean, I'm not even going to last as long as Scaramucci. Like, this is a one-day affair. And obviously I didn't know that was
quick.
But the point is that everyone thinks that, like, I mean, I thought that he was going to be extremely psyched that I walked out there and I was tough as nails, and he was like, what were you thinking? I mean, I literally didn't know if I was going to get my ID. That's like they were just going to escort me out of the building. Nope, don't put anything in the desk. Yeah. So I don't have a problem with being clear that that's a day that I wish I could do over.
You may be the only person in this room who has a Saturday Night Live character. You're very young.
And a bottle.
Do you own a bottle? Oh, that's excellent.
I'd rather talk about that.
And you met Melissa McCarthy?
No. Well, the truth is that I said that all the time, and then somebody said at one point, there was a Time 100 dinner 3 years ago, I think it is now, and that she was being honored as well as Rice Priebus was being honored. And there's somebody who said you shook her hand at that dinner. So technically, if there's like a fact checker in the audience, that I apparently, according to some sources, anonymous, that I did shake her hand at one point, but not since my tenure in the White House. I have not met her.
Well, there's time.
Yeah.
All right, I am an audience. Thank you for these questions. I'm going to say I can only ask them if I can read them, so if there are more coming up, please make sure that they are very legible. Do you believe, and most of them are, just to clear it, do you believe that your conduct as White House Press Secretary helped, hindered, or had no impact on the importance of sustaining a free and fair press in America? And what impact do you believe your words had on the current unhealthy environment?
There's no question that there are days that I look back at sort of some of the engagements and exchanges that I had that I thought I could have been a better person in that, right or wrong, that I look and go, you know what, maybe they weren't right, but I could have been better in that situation. I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't have a similar thought, whether it's a complete stranger or a friend or a professional acquaintance. I go, was that the best I could have been in that situation? No, just to be a better person. It's not always about the press. Sometimes it's just being a good human being. And I think that there are days when I look back.
Well, as press secretary, right?
Right, but I think that that's the problem. It's not. It's actually at some point we can be good people. And there are days when I look back and I go, that interaction was not the best it could have been. It's not always one-sided though. I think there are plenty of days when I think I wish that some of the folks in the press could have done a better job or been more respectful. I think there's days that I could have been better. There's no question about it. But again, this gets back to one of the points that we talked about, is that it's not a one-way street. I think I could have done a better job. I think I could be better at plenty of interactions. But I think that at some point the press corps needs to stop and ask themselves similar questions. Could we have done a better job? Is this the appropriate and respectful behavior that we should be exhibiting? Is this what we want young people to look up and say, I want to be a journalist because that's the kind of behavior that's appropriate?
Well, I mean, the press works really hard to do a good job, right?
Here's the thing. There are some journalists that I think are amazing, that work very hard, that are professional, respectful, fair, tough, but there are a bunch that aren't. And the problem that I have with the press corps by and large right now is that no one in the press will ever criticize each other. No one will ever say, I'm sorry, your behavior does not speak well.
I think Fox News criticizes other media outlets pretty frequently.
I respectfully disagree with that.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
I think if you're going to put this is the problem. If you're going to lay everything at the feet of Fox News,
I'm not trying to.
you just accuse Fox News, but
What kills me is when I hear journalists talking about like the media as if they're not part of the media, right? Or commentators, columnists. I see that sometimes, right?
Who's not part of the media?
When you hear public commentators on radio or on television talking about the media, right?
And as I've said at the beginning, no, but at the beginning I said that I was very clear in my opinion that I don't think that you should ever take any industry or group and paint them with a broad brush. I don't, but, so I think my opinion has been very clear on this. I just think that that kind of swipe at Fox is part of the problem.
Okay. And I did not mean to swipe at Fox. There are a lot of journalists at Fox News that I truly respect. Moving on. There are now at least, this is a question from the audience, there are now at least 2 people who have recorded their conversations with President Trump. Is this an issue or of lack of trust, or what do you think it is?
I think it's disgusting and reprehensible. I think the idea that you can sit in a room with an employer, never mind a government official, never mind the President of the United States, never mind the Situation Room, and not think twice about recording is unpatriotic, disrespectful, wrong, and I am literally taken back by how the blatant level of disrespect, untrustworthiness, and frankly, lack of security. I mean, the idea that someone thinks that that's okay, to me is not good. And I hope that if they have violated any laws, that they are prosecuted to the extent that the law allows.
What are your thoughts on white supremacist rallies in Charlottesville and Washington? Aside from exercising their First Amendment rights, should the remarks of hate groups be answered directly by the White House in specific terms?
I think so. Look, we are a country that allows people to express themselves freely, but in the cases that people are doing or speaking for something that is reprehensible or not in accord with our society's standards of conduct, i.e. putting down someone because of their race, religion, creed, they should be called out. And I think that leaders have an obligation to call that out and to say that this is not acceptable, and to not that it's not acceptable, to denounce it.
As press secretary, you were paid by the American people. Did you represent them in that job, or solely and specifically President Donald Trump?
I think you represent the people, you are paid by the people, but to some extent the people have elected Donald Trump to institute and enact policy. So I believe that I serve the American people, but I also, part of that is that they have, through our republic, elected people to serve them, and you are serving an employee at will of them to enact, support, and enunciate their policies and agenda.
So when you are representing the president who is elected by the American people?
Correct.
Okay. Did you ever try to dissuade the president from anything?
Yes.
Can you give us an example?
No.
Did any of it involve trade?
There are plenty of times when I gave the president advice about the most effective ways to communicate an issue or a statement or an idea. There are plenty of times that he took it and he would say, all right, fine. There are some times when he went halfway and he said, well, maybe I'll just do it this way. And there's sometimes when he said, I'm sorry, I disagree with you. My job was to give him the best advice and counsel possible privately and urge him to do what I thought he was best. But ultimately, he's the president of the United States. He would make the decision as to what and how he wanted to do it. And but that's frankly the job of the press person.
Here's a question from President Gerald Ford's White House press secretary, who is here in the audience today. And before that, he covered President Lyndon Johnson as a correspondent for NBC News. So his question is, Do you think that President Trump receives a lot of criticism because reporters are liberal and he is conservative? This is a question.
I think there are a number of reporters who have an agenda in the White House. Some of it personal, some of it ideological. But as I mentioned in an earlier question, the analysis speaks for itself. Look, you have 60, 70, up to 90% of the coverage being viewed as negative. There are plenty of reporters. The problem that I think one of the big issues that I have that's happened obviously in the last several years is that the advent of social media and a lot of these folks appearing on cable news channels has allowed them to get on Twitter and or cable channels and panels and express their personal view and say, and they've lost, the line of objectivity has gotten greater and greater. And I think that has become a bigger and bigger problem where when there are folks that make comments, and there was one cable news host the other day that said the president is a racist. Okay, I don't see how you can possibly be an objective journalist when you very publicly come out and stated your opinion of personally what you're thinking. And then to say, but I'm not going to allow that to cloud my judgment. I mean, I don't understand how some of these folks can say the comments that they do publicly and then act as though their reporting isn't colored by what they've said, their personal belief is of this president, of conservatives, or Republicans.
You're saying that from reporters, not commentators?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, the whole spectrum.
How do you compare the responsibility of the press secretary to the president versus the press corps? How do you, so I think the question is, when is your responsibility as press secretary to the president and when is it to the press corps?
Well, ultimately, I think it's to the American people. And it's to say to the president, as I stated, I mean, I've been an advocate for a free and transparent press, for access to the press. And there were plenty of times when I would go in and say to the president, you know, this is traditionally, we need to allow this to happen. This needs to be seen or viewed, and I would advocate very strongly for press access. One of the biggest compliments that I still get from a lot of reporters when I write this in the book is the democratization of the press room. I believe that every reporter that attends that briefing is entitled to a question. Not everyone can get one because of time constraints sometimes. But I'm very proud of the fact that during my tenure, I did as much as I could to bring in as many different voices to that press room. For those who haven't been in there, there's 49 chairs, and those chairs are assigned by the White House Correspondents Association since the Reagan era, the first portion. And if you're a niche organization, for the most part, you don't get a seat. You can line up along the walls, whatever. I believe that local news, Hispanic news, urban news, financial news, all of those people deserve a question. They all represent constituencies that have issues that are important to them and deserve a question and an answer from the White House. And I know it irritated the heck out of the sort of the front rows, which is where the broadcasters, the Washington Post, New York Times, and the wire services sit. But I don't think they get to control the agenda and the narrative. It's just as important to hear what a business reporter or Univision or American Urban Radio or frankly some of the conservative outlets and talk radio, they all deserve a question. And I think too often there was this stranglehold of what issues were deemed worthy of being asked.
Another question from the audience. Do you believe, from what you have learned, that the Russians meddled in the 2016 election?
Absolutely. The Russians meddled in the
based on what you've learned.
Look, I think there's no question that the Russians have been trying to meddle in our elections for a while. But that is separate and distinct from whether or not they colluded with the campaign. So there's two issues, and the problem that I think right now with a lot of the coverage is we've taken those two separate issues and allowed them to become one circle. And we need to bifurcate them, because we need to call out Russia or any other entity that attempts to undermine the integrity of our election systems or the integrity of our institutions. That is 100% separate and distinct from whether or not there was any collusion in the election, to which I have seen no evidence during the campaign or since that ever occurred. So, but I think it's important, and I think frankly the biggest issue that I have right now is that what Russia really tried to do wasn't meddle in our election. What they tried to do is use their activity to undermine the integrity of our vote, the integrity of our institutions, and frankly, in some way, they are succeeding. Because we are all now questioning whether or not what we can believe, whether we can trust. That's the bigger problem, is that we've allowed this to, for whatever they paid, $100,000 in Facebook ads, in a lot of ways, they're getting what they wanted, and that is concerning.
Do you think it was okay for President Trump to have met with President Putin and then to not divulge to the American people what was discussed?
Well, of course it's okay to meet with them. I mean, Nixon went to China, Obama went to Cuba. Well, look, I think you have to understand to some degree the mindset. Here you have a president who every time he has a call with a foreign leader gets leaked out. And every action that he's had, which is a whole other story. But if you're the president and you realize every time I meet with somebody who doesn't agree with what I'm going to talk about gets leaked out, then at some point you just say everybody out of the room. I don't know what I would have done in that situation, but I understand the mentality, which is that I want to be able to have a conversation. I don't want it to be leaked out. And so what? You know what? This is how I'm going to do it. And you know what the funny thing is? For the most part, not much got leaked out. And it's weird, but it's just, unfortunately, the guy has a phone call. I mean, the first week he's there with the Prime Minister of Australia, the President of Mexico, and the entire transcript goes out. I mean, I think you're going to develop a whole sense of saying, hey, less is more when it comes to these meetings. So I don't know, who knew what in terms of did he back brief them, did he not, how does it work, but I understand that after a certain amount of time, you go, look, the current process is not working.
All right, last two questions from the audience. What is the most important thing you would like for America to know about your story?
I wrote a really good book that you should buy. My wife's clapping. I mean, I have to. I'd be an idiot if I didn't say that.
And do you see yourself re-entering the political arena before the 2020 election, perhaps through the RNC?
No. I'm affiliated with America First, the super PAC that supports the president and his policies. I am a senior advisor there. I love that role that I play. That's probably as deep as I want to go back in. It's an intense life. I mean, I never want to talk about just the tenure in the White House, but I was at the RNC for 6 years. Went through 3 election cycles, 2 general elections. That's unheard of. And I don't. That's not a level of intensity that would be excited to redo. I like picking up the phone and having conversations now because I enjoy them, not because I have to. And I'd like to continue that. So I love politics, it's in my blood. I love public service, I love this country. I love being engaged in issues that I'm passionate about, but I'm more on the volunteer side of it now.
So what can we say is next for Sean Spicer?
Well, I've got a podcast called Everything's Gonna Be All Right. I've got a website up called SeanSpicer.com that people can sign up and get that kind of information. I've had a couple conversations about entertainment projects. I've got a consultancy that I serve some C-suite folks on strategy issues. Do a lot of public speaking, and continue for the next month and a half to promote the book, get out there and talk about it. I think as we head into the midterm elections, based on my background, not just the RNC, but the NRCC, the NRSC, and the various candidates I work for, doing a lot of election and political analysis as well.
Very good. Well, we'd like to thank you very much for being here tonight. Before we wrap up, I'd like to present you with a mug from the National Press Club. We give this to all our esteemed speakers. And I'd like to say thank you very much for being here with us tonight.